born in 1885, and I wrote 55 on the sheet, so we were editing by pen, turning my 5s into 8s. So here are the sheets. My able assistant, my wonderful niece Jessica will hand them out. Oh, there. All right. Good. Okay.
Yep, when you're ready.
Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the Anderson Falls Heritage Society, welcome to the second presentation of our 2025 Summer Speakers Series. Our presenter tonight is Mr. Doug Estes. Doug Estes was raised in Glen Ridge, New Jersey, and graduated from RPI in 1985, joining the family business that same year. He's the great-great-great-grandson of Benjamin Hall Estes and the great-great-grandson of Elihu Beech Estes, founder of EB Estes and Sons, which was renamed Clifford W. Estes Company in the mid-20th century. Doug is the 5th generation to run the company. Now, all 4 of his children work at the company, representing the 6th generation. Please welcome Doug Estes.
Thank you. I want to thank you all for being here and inviting me. I want to especially thank Nancy for finding our company and finding me. It was a wonderful find and a wonderful connection. I want to thank Garth. The picture here is, it's a little hard to make out, but Garth personally cleaned up my great-great-great-grandfather, Benjamin Hall Estes' gravestone that's in the cemetery in Port Kent. And Garth, I just want to, again, thank you for that. It was very, very kind. I also want to thank the woman who wrote the piece in the paper, Robin. She was very kind, took a lot of time to talk to me on the phone, and really helped me to crystallize my thinking of how, especially in the later generations, like when I got involved, she really helped me get my head together on that and really helped the presentation quite a bit. I want to thank my wonderful niece Jessica for helping me. And one of the slides you'll see is an associate of mine, Rick's, one of the later slides, and he helped with the, I've never done PowerPoint. Believe it or not, I've never done PowerPoint before. He does it all the time, so he got it together and helped me through it. And I've since found it's not that hard, but he got me through it, and I appreciate that. So this is about the history of the business, the history of the family, and it's about business, and it's a family business. I've studied family business, and there is a trend on a good day and a good best, not necessarily best, but best usual case scenario, a business will last 3 generations. The first generation is a pioneer. The second generation is brought up with more affluence, they're trained, they're better educated, they bring a professional level and bring it to heights. The third generation is born with a silver spoon in their mouth, and let's be kind, they fritter it away. And we're going to track that paradigm, and basically my paradigm is, if you see the sheets, so my grandfather was that 3rd generation. My dad, my uncle, and their cousin was the 4th, but in a way they were the 2nd pioneers. I've usually thought of myself as the second generation, although I sort of, to give my kids the benefit of the doubt, I am sort of a bridge of another pioneer into professional, and I am trusting that my children will be the ones to take it to the next level, because we'll talk about that later. So my first slide here, as I mentioned, this is the headstone for my Benjamin Hall Estes, the founder of the firm. Interesting, my middle son is named Benjamin Hall Estes, and I refer to him as the next me. Everyone knows he will be the next leader of the company. He's not as smart as me yet, but he is in fact more capable, and we'll talk about that some more. So there is the founder of the firm, Elihu Beech Estes, and the one, I'm going to read the biography that his son wrote of his father. And two things I want to mention is one of our mottos is color specialist since 1847, and as early as 1898, it was claimed that the founding was 1847. But in this biography, you have to really dig and figure out how this works. So let me read this for you. Elihu Beech Estes, son of Benjamin Hall Estes, his mother's name was Esther Higley, was born in Fairfax, Vermont, December 23, 1828, and spent his boyhood days in Vermont and northern New York. He went to New York before he was 21 and lived on Christopher Street in Brooklyn. He went into the hardware business with H. Waglam, and the firm was Estes and Waglam. They had a store in Hamilton Avenue near the ferry. In 1850 or 51, he married Hannah Smith Meeker of Schenectady, New York. In 1855, he retired from hardware and moved to Port Kent, where he continued to manufacture Estes painter's ball, and to put up the same to New York, Boston, and Philadelphia. Also manufactured a line of grocer sundries. He lived in Port Kent, New York until 1862, when he moved to Brooklyn for 1 year, and while there, his wife Hannah Meeker died. He returned to Port Kent and continued to live there and carried on his business at that place until 1869, when he sold his home and also his factory building in Port Kent and transferred all his business to New York City. In 1874, he added turned wooden boxes, we'll talk about that a lot later, and turned wooden goods to his other lines. After moving to New York in 1869, his business grew very rapidly. Shortly after moving to New York, he bought a plot of land in Flatbush, Long Island, and built a home. And in that vicinity, he built several blocks of buildings, which he rented. In 1877, he took his son, Webster, into partnership with him. And in 1880, he admitted his eldest son into the partnership. That way, he was known as Frank Estes. After this, the firm was known as EB Estes and Sons. Mr. Estes continued an active business in Pearl Street, New York, from 1869 to 1886 when he retired. During most of this time, he occupied the building on Pearl Street and other buildings on Pearl Street. After he retired from business, his son Webster carried on the business alone, but Mr. Estes still retained an interest until 1891, when he sold out his interests. When Mr. Estes was engaged in manufacturing at Port Kent, William Waglam of Greenwich Street was his New York agent for several years, and later Oliver Hall of Pearl Street were his New York agents. Mr. Estes was 5 feet 10 inches high, had dark brown hair, and brown eyes. Now, two things. They never mention the starting date of the business. And the other interesting thing is, if you do the math, he was born in 1828. 1847, he was 19 years old. Now, going back to his father, and I think I even quoted in the article, I misstated. I went back and checked. I said that Elihu would take the black sand by wagon to Boston, New York, Philadelphia. It was actually Benjamin that would do that. And Elihu picked up the black sand as a sign painting material and then developed colors, and that's what he started in 1847 as an adjacent to his dad when he was all of 19 years old. So that was Elihu, and he was in fact the pioneer. He did what he had to do, and his big step, while he started in the sign painter small, that move into wooden products and wood turn products was the big move, and that's what grew the business and set the stage for the next one on the list, who is Webster Cummings Estes, the classic second generation. He was professionally trained, he grew up in the business, and very interesting, this is family folklore that I've only heard verbally. I have not, there's no document, how could there be documentation of this? And that is how Webster earned his first dollar. Back in those days when he was a young lad and living at Fort Kent, it was common, their source of fuel was coal, and coal boats would come and unload coal down like where the ferry used to be, down on the dock. And invariably, as you could imagine, in the process of unloading coal, a certain amount of coal would land in the lake. And he would, the industrious young man he would dive into the lake, gather the coal that fell, bring it up, dry it, and sell it, and that's how he made his first dollar. Wow. So he, as it said in there, he joined the business, and he was the one who really got it to take off. There's a picture, this is a picture of one of their mills in Hancock, Massachusetts. They had a mill in Gorham, New Hampshire, which is where my dad was born in Gorham in 1920, while my grandfather was there helping to manage that mill. They had mills in Maine, they had mills in Canada, and they even had mills down into North Carolina. This is a price list. My kids gave me those price lists that are on the wall there in frames. This is a picture of one of them. I didn't realize this. They gave me this picture like probably 3 or 4 years ago, and it wasn't until I was getting ready for this that I realized that not only did they do wood turn products, but they made handles for hammers, axes, and so forth. Anything that was wood they made. But their big enchilada was the wood turn boxes. These were pill boxes for pharmaceuticals and pharmaceutical chemicals, and they were the powerhouse pharmaceutical packaging in the world. They had offices in New York City, they had offices in London, Paris. They sold to virtually every country in Europe, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, any country that used pharmaceuticals, they supplied. This is my one sad part. This is a copy of a newspaper. My cousin in Boston sent this to me, and I couldn't get it clear enough, but this is a makeup. Let me see if I can do this. This is the middle one, right? So this is Webster Estes. This is Elihu Beech. That's Webster, my great-grandfather. This is his brother Frank. Now this was his board of directors, and this one here is Sir Joseph Beecham, the founder of Beecham Pharmaceuticals. He was not only a very good friend, he was on the board of directors, he was a customer, and he was such good friends of my great-grandfather that my great-grandfather named, if you look further down the line on the paper, his second son was Joseph Beecham Estes. And he was commonly referred to, my dad knew him as Uncle Beecham. So it's kind of interesting. So that second generation, Webster Cummings, oh, you know what? Let me take time. I meant to say this at the beginning. If anyone has any questions, we're going through many, many years, many generations. If you have any question for clarification or curiosity, don't feel like you have to save it. Just raise your hand, give me the question now so we can keep going and keep things on track in the history of the family and the company. So I welcome questions as we go. So that ties up the second generation. Now, unfortunately, that brings us to my grandfather, the third generation. And in fact, as I talked about the third generation, he was born with a silver spoon, and he and his brothers did fritter away the company. They wound up selling off mills, wound up selling off all of the wood turning business, and which later went into receivership. And the only thing they had left was the sign painting small business, the Colored Sand. Now, it wasn't totally my grandfather's fault. One of the things that happened was that my great-grandfather, who was he was the head honcho, and he ran the train. He died suddenly in 1927, and he had not fully prepared his sons to take over. He had not fully prepared the business to operate without him, and that's how it floundered. Also, right during that time, the packaging of pills and pharmaceuticals moved from wood into glass and other materials, so the demand went down, and they were in a bad spot. But in any event, what wound up happening is everything fell apart, and my dad was alive at that time. When my dad was 5 years old, before his grandfather died, they were living in a very posh suburb of New York City, Bronxville, New York, in a large house with a live-in butler and a live-in maid. And once, shortly after, I don't know, certainly by the time the Great Depression began, they struggled mightily from then going forward until the next generation took over and started making things happen. It was a touch and go. One of the things, the remaining small company was located in Kearny, New Jersey, maybe 7-8 miles from New York City. And what helped them to get through was that my grandfather's brother-in-law was, his name is George Manassian. Remember the name Manassian. You'll see it down the line. It's on the sheet. But George Manassian, the Commodore's brother-in-law, he was the head engineer for Con Edison in the project during the 30s of converting Manhattan's energy from direct current to alternate current, from DC to AC. So he was well paid, he had a fantastic job, and he had money and resources. And not only that, he had business acumen. So he helped with money, loans. Also, they had a very nice building in Kearny, and there was an up-and-coming standard tool company that was ramping up because they were supplying goods for the war, the looming war effort, defense contracts, etc. And they needed they had a shack of a building, and they wound up trading that shack for the nice building and cash that the Estes company had. So that company wound up in a falling down shack, but it got them through the Depression and World War II and let them hang on until the next generation came up. This is my grandfather's youngest son, joined him in the business while he was still doing small in the early 1950s. And by the mid-50s, he had a family to support, he had a wife and kids, and he could see that they were going nowhere fast with sign painter small, sign painter sand, a black and other colors they made. So he had to figure out, what can we do with this stuff? How can we use this stuff? He asked a friend of his for advice, and he said, you could put it in aquariums. That's an up-and-coming hobby, and give it a go. So he tried some formulas, he killed some fish, found a formula that worked, and he personally pioneered. It started with him, and this is the way his day would go. I'll start it from about the middle of the day. From the middle of the day on, he would go around and gather orders from pet stores for his colored sand and gravel. He would go then back to the shop, paint up what he needed, pour it out onto trays, and let it dry overnight. He would get in the next day at 5 in the morning, bag up the gravel, assemble the orders. He would load it up into his Rambler station wagon. When the tailpipe got to be about this far from the ground, that's as far as he could go. He would go out and deliver it. And in those days in the 1950s, now I would imagine he'd probably still do this here in Port Kent and the area. But back then, even in the New York metro area, you could drop off an order, staple a bill at the front door of a pet shop, and it would be waiting for them when they opened the shop. And so George Manassian's son, my dad and my uncle's cousin, Dave Manassian, joined in. Now, remember, the building they were in was something of a shack. To give you an idea, there was this, I'll give you two examples, and there are many, but it had a window, there was a certain window, and the rule was you had to keep that window closed. Now, the irony was, the window was broken, but nevertheless, you had to keep the window closed. Then there's the other one where, well, let me tell you some of the history. So when Dave was the most professionally, he had actually gone to college, he was very mechanically inclined. He was the best spoken, most engaging, but he started helping Frank produce gravel in the factory. And by then they were more into, they would call in orders, they had established the business and they had to make product. And he would tell Frank, hey, you ought to try this thing, you ought to try that thing. And finally, Frank didn't like having his younger cousin tell him what to do. So he said, listen, and my cousin, or my Uncle Frank, he called everybody Mo. He would say, and he said, listen, Mo, let me make the gravel, you go out and sell it. So Dave said, okay, I'll go out and sell it. So he goes out, and while he's out, he wanders into, or this is probably late 50s, maybe early 60s. They didn't even know there were pet products distributors. But he went into Gallo Pet Supplies and met Mr. Gallo, and Mr. Gallo said, I ought to throw you out of here. And he was like, what? I'm just trying to sell it. You're selling to all my customers. And he brought him in, he brought Dave into his office, sat him down, and said, look, you're a manufacturer. You have no business going, you're going to limit yourself. You can only do so much delivering to individual stores. You need to sell to a distributor and let me deliver it to even more pet stores than you can ever get to. So the story goes that day he came back, he was all excited, and he's like, hey Frank, I've got good news and bad news. The good news is I found a really big customer. The bad news is we have to stop selling to all of our other customers. And Frank is like, oh, what have I done? But it worked out. He was the marketing, and from then on, and to this day, we sell to independent distributors who sell to independent pet stores. When I was, and so that, and even to that point, Dave not only developed that network of distribution customers, he also gathered together, there was this, he helped form with, he was one of the 17 founders of the National Pet Manufacturers Association. It was called the American Pet Products. I think it was, pretty sure it was the early 60s, or early mid 60s, and he was in fact even went on to be the president of the American Pet Products. And so from, yes?
I'm just wondering, this is new, did you have a patent for that? I mean, after you've got marketing and the guy manufacturing, it sounds like this is the first invention.
Yeah, they were not sophisticated enough to do that. And the other factor is that they developed formulas as they went and made them better and better. And in fact, even in my tenure, let me see if I can think about the number, just in aquarium gravel, I think there's like 5 iterations of coatings in my 40 years that we've developed. And I'll get to that when I get to my generation, but no, they were really not sophisticated enough to think about patents. It was very, and to that point, again, going back to it was Laurel Avenue in Kearney. I wish I had a picture of it, but when they moved out of there, the building was converted to its best use. It was taken down and made a parking lot. But while they were still there, And I remember as a kid, my dad would come home in a different color every night, based on what they were coloring or what they were coloring last. But this one day, my dad was home sick with the flu, and Dave took over, and he called my house. He was like screaming. I just put a full bucket of paint on a hook, and the hook collapsed, and it spilled over everything. It's all over me. It's all over everything. And my dad said, well, didn't you know that hook is only for empty pails? And that's kind of the way that place was. The broken window and the hook for empty pails. And that's why when they moved to a larger facility, it became a parking lot. So, but from 1955 to 1975, they ran a very tight, very profitable company. They had pioneered, but they did a fantastic job. But in 1975, they hit a number of roadblocks. One was Nancy, you noticed the terrarium sand sample I had back there. We still make terrariums, art sand we call it now. And that was a huge craze in the mid-70s. And it nearly doubled our sales, but when it stopped dead. And we had to retrench, and they were slow to retrench. They also had competition arise, and the fuel crises of the 1970s, both for the coatings and the coatings cost, but also a major cost when you're dealing with gravel, a major factor dealing with gravel and sand is dealing with logistics. And so cost of getting gravel to us and getting product to our customers and they had to manage all that. And the company really struggled from 75, 10 years before I started, really through 1995 and a little bit further, 10 years into my tenure. But during that time, there were some bright spots. Oh, I'm sorry. So again, I started in 1985. This is the other part of the fifth generation. Frank's son, my cousin Steve, he started in 1978. Sadly, he came down with cancer and passed away in 2009. So now I am the sole survivor of carrying on the tradition. But with him and me and our dads and Dave, they established a factory. We actually started developing this factory at a Redden facility in 1975 down in North Carolina. And in 1987, they built, first time they ever built a full-on factory from the ground up in 1987. And this is our factory to this day, although this factory was 23,000 square feet. We now have at this location, it's like 75 or 80,000 square feet, plus an annex building that's another 40,000 square feet. The other exciting thing in the late 80s was we established this factory out in Ottawa, Illinois. We had a new burgeoning product that was sand for seamless epoxy floors. The initial company, was it Nancy, you mentioned 3M. Well, in the mid-70s, 3M took the roofing granule that they put in roofing shingles and they started selling it into flooring applications. And we saw that as an opportunity, and we copied that with our resin coating. And in 1988, we had enough of that business where we set up a factory. This factory is less than 2 miles from the major sand supplier that we use. We have another backup supplier. It's like, I don't know, 15 miles away. So a key to our locations was close to source. North Carolina had great sources. Illinois, and this is in Ottawa, Illinois. This is the trivia of the night. I would venture to say you hear Ottawa, you think of Ottawa, Canada. There is an Ottawa, Illinois, and the claim to fame to Ottawa, Illinois is in the when the Lincoln-Douglas debates happened before the Civil War, when Lincoln was running for Congress or for the Senate and lost. they had a series of debates. The first Lincoln Douglas debate happened in Washington Park in Ottawa, Illinois. So, and we started with this building, 7,200 square feet. We added these extra warehouses as building, so this is 72. I think this is like about 8,000 and 14,000. So it's a fairly substantial, and we're hoping to be able to buy this property next door. There's an older gentleman who owns it, and every time I ask about it, the price goes up. But I could really use that property to expand out there. So anyway, that was in 1988. And this was sort of in the transition of the fourth generation, the second pioneers, to the fifth generation, which is me. And I came to realize that in the fourth and fifth and sixth generation, that paradigm, the more I thought about it, the more I realized it was kind of breaking down. Because I see myself the first half of my career as picking up these new opportunities, regrouping from the tough years, and sort of being pioneering the new product lines and all that. The other part of Pioneer, there was some grave mistakes made in the first 5 years of my tenure. Between 1985 and when I started in 1985, 90% of the sales was a quarry and gravel. And virtually all of it was, like I talked about, under Dave's leadership, selling to independent distributors, which were family businesses, who distributed to independent pet stores, which were family businesses. There was no PetSmart. There was no pet department at Walmart's. And Petco was a 9-store chain in California. Obviously, that's not the way it is now. In that first 5 years, PetSmart, we actually started selling, we were the first gravel vendor to PetSmart, because our territory was east of the Rockies. That's what we could do with shipping and all. And so when they started, their first stores were in Philadelphia, we said, no problem, we'll sell you. We'll sell you a truck, you distribute them among your 4 stores, we're good. Their next 4 stores were in Denver. We don't have anything in Denver, we'll sell it to you, no problem. Their next 4 stores were in Texas. We had distributors in Texas. In fact, we still are fiercely loyal, and we said very politely but directly, I'm really sorry, we're sorry, but if you want to buy our gravel in Texas, you need to buy it through our distributors. They say, we understood, thank you very much. They hung up the phone and called our West Coast competitor, and that was the last we sold to PetSmart. And I'll finish that story in a little bit. And Walmart came to us when they started the pet department, wanted to buy our gravel. Our Southeast rep said, you don't want to sell to them, they don't pay well, and if you have your gravel in Walmart, you're going to make your established retail customers really angry at you. You don't just say no thank you. So we said no thank you. And so that's the way it was. What Robin challenged me with is to express and explain how did the traditions and the skill and things that were passed down through the generations affect my generation. So, and as I thought of, and I answered to that question, I said, well, you know what? First thing was that, especially my dad and my uncle and Dave, they all had very strong faith. And that was transferred down to me and Steve. And our faith, our relationship with the Lord, our church, and all of that really regulated how we ran the business. And that was a very key part. Another one was loyalty, a loyalty to our employees, our customers, even our supplier. We're very loyal. And there was, and it really started, started back in the Laurel Avenue days with the hooks and the windows, but we were very humble. We didn't want to get too big for our britches. We were humble gravel peddlers, and there has always been a sense of humility and, just being humble people. Now on the other side, this is one, that the other one was the importance of their wives, who were stalwarts. When my grandfather was struggling through the Depression, through World War II, having to go to his brother-in-law for help to keep the business afloat, his wife, my grandmother, Mary Estes, was a stalwart, supporting him, encouraging him, keeping him going. And in fact, even providing the relationship. It was her sister who was married to George Manassian. My dad, and my mom supported my dad unflinchingly, like steadfast and there all the time. Frank's wife, Barbara, was the same way, and Dave's wife, Mary Ann. And they took care of the children, they took care of the home. My mom did some bookkeeping work for the company. Whenever there was something to be pitched in, Mary Ann would help, my Aunt Barbara would help, and I am very blessed that my wife has been there for me, been a fantastic mom, been a terrific wife, and through some challenging times that I had, she was always there encouraging me and supporting me. And I know that my dad and my uncle would want to give honor to their wives. I want to give honor to my wife. And the women who were involved were stalwart and just wonderful. And I don't know if it would have all worked out without that support. The places of difference was that the older generation, that it was very family focused. And so in other words, like Dave, even though he's cousin, he's still family, that was okay. But if you weren't family, you could only go so far and you could only be trusted so far. And I kind of broke through that. And then also there was a level of risk taking, that I was willing to take risks. And I'll explain some of the risks that I took through my journey. And then, but I think the next slide, oh, I'm sorry. So I'm gonna go back to this slide. This is our acquisition that we did in 2007. And I'll go back to that because risks in acquisitions, I did three major acquisitions in my career. And I'll talk about that shortly, but, well, I'll talk about it now because the other thing they didn't like getting outside help or outside advice. Now this is my quote-unquote Uncle Ken Kenrich. He's not my uncle. He actually was a box worker. He sold boxes to, my uncle Frank was the one who bought the boxes for the company. And Ken came in and gave him a better deal and became the supplier of boxes in the late 80s. And when Frank retired, he started dealing with me, and he really took me under his wing. He's a fiercely bright guy. He got his engineering degree from Harvard and his MBA from MIT Sloan Business School. And when I was going through our first acquisition in 1998, he counseled me, encouraged me, but when we had the deal together, I went to my bank because we were going to be adding $2 million to our revenue, and I needed some working capital, and they said, you're tapped out. So I was telling Ken about it and said, boy, I could really use it to raise some money. So my cousin, Steve, and I were out to lunch with Ken. We were chatting, and this is a seminal story of Uncle Ken. And toward the end of lunch, Ken brings it up, and he goes, so do you guys need the money? And I look at my cousin and go, yeah, about $100,000? Yeah, you'll pay me back when you can? Yeah, okay. He reaches into his wallet, pulls out a check that looks like it'd been there for 10 years, and writes a check to the Clifford W. Estes Company for $100,000, gives it to me, and says, pay me back when you can. Now, fortunately, when we did the successful acquisition, I think it was like 3 years we hadn't paid back because we recouped and were able to do that. Fortunately, in 2007, it was a good enough deal and we had good banking relationships that we could use bank financing to buy that one. But then in 2011, and this kind of blends in the not only Uncle Ken, but also the faith aspect. 2011, we had just lost Petco, our second largest customer, to a competitor. And I was getting ready to go to the national trade show. I knew they would be there, and they were the kind of guys that I thought would gloat. And I never wanted to go to a trade show less than that year. But the Sunday before that, I went to a church service and the pastor encouraged me and I took a deep breath and went down to the show, and to my surprise, I saw those guys. They were the Dow brothers, and they presented an attitude of, they didn't say it, they wouldn't say it, but I got the feeling it's like they weren't quite sure that they got the better deal doing what they had to do to get the Petco business. And then they came to me and said, we have this concept of doing a joint venture. If you and I combine and we relocate and have one big factory in Alabama, we could just rule the pet world. And they talked about it, we talked back and forth, but I knew their corporate culture and our culture, it was just not the same. And I'm a big believer in do not be unequally yoked. And we would have been unequally yoked. So I just let it sit. And finally, he reached out to me and I said, you know, I really can't do that. No, I'm sorry. Before he reached out and I said, no, you can't do it. And I was stewing about the whole thing. And I remember sitting in my parking lot and thinking about, praying about what was going on and what they had talked about and all that. And it's like the skies open, and it's like I almost heard the audible voice say, buy him. And it was Friday afternoon. I went into my office, I called him up, and I said, you know, we can't do that joint venture, but I'm wondering, would you be open to us buying you? And I talked to the younger brother, who was 25% ownership, and he said, well, I got to talk to my older brother, who's 75%. I don't think he's going to go for it, but I'll try to get a hold of him, and I'll get back to you when I can. And later that day, he got back to me and said, yeah, my brother said, no, we can't do that. And I said, okay, that's fine, we'll carry on and all that. Well, that was Friday. The following Monday morning, the brother called me and said, you know what, we thought about it over the weekend, and it's a good idea. Let's see if we can make that happen. Now, again, a couple of weeks later, I went to church, and the pastor saw me scowling, and I was like, and he says, well, you're usually a smiley guy, why are you scowling? I said, you know, I just don't know what to pay for this company. I'm not sure what to pay. And he said, well, ask the Lord, he'll tell you. And sure enough, he did. And wouldn't you know, when we came to negotiate, all right, what are we going to pay for this? They gave a number, which was the number I had. And now I heard through the grapevine that they called me a sap for taking their first offer. It's like, what was I supposed to do? I mean, they gave me my number, the number I had been given from above. So I did it, and again, we had no money. And interestingly enough, there's another side note. I've gone to there's a mergers and acquisition middle market company that focuses on selling businesses that are like 10 million to, I don't know, $100 million revenues. And they do seminars to tell you how you should do it and like draw you in to employ them to help you sell their company. I went to several of their seminars. I didn't go because I wanted to sell my company. I wanted to learn how they sell and how I can buy. And they had 3 rules that they said. Number 1, do not sell to a competitor because it's very confidential, and if invariably word gets out and if the deal blows up, your name is besmirched. It's just a bad idea. Do not sell to a competitor. Number 2, they had a phrase, one buyer is no buyers. Their whole concept was you had to get 2 or more buyers to bid to raise up the price. Number 3, cash is king. Do not take paper, do not take back a loan. Cash is king. Well, in this acquisition, they were our number 1 gravel competitor. Number 2, we were the only buyer. And number 3, they took back almost the entire price in paper. And so they violated all 3. They thought they had taken me in, but they violated all 3, and we wound up paying them back 2 years early. And through the Colorado acquisition, it took that acquisition to get our foot in the door with Wilmar and with PetSmart. And by doing that acquisition with the one I just talked about, we got 100%, we got Petco back because they had taken Petco. And even to this day, we are 100% supplier of Petco for their colored gravel. We got 100% of PetSmart, we're their sole source of colored gravel. And Walmart, we had 25% from the Colorado acquisition. We got the other 75% that Dow did. So we have 100% Walmart sole source for their aquarium gravel. So that was the big acquisition. And then with the Dow deal, again, our bank froze us because we were taking on all this debt from the sellers. And I was telling Uncle Ken about it. Now, he was a little bit older then, so he couldn't just rip out his check. He said, you know, I have to do this right because I don't know what will happen to me, and I want to make sure you pay my wife back, and I have to tell her about it this time. And so we need an agreement and all. And I don't know if he told her about it last time, but he didn't mention it, but he said, I've got to do it right. So we had an agreement written up and signed up, and we had him pay back in 2 years. So it was another $100,000, but it wasn't as flamboyant as the first time around, but he did it again. So that's Uncle Ken, the outside person who was willing to help, non-family, but he sure felt like family. He did a lot to make me the businessman that I am. The other thing, as I talked about, in terms of taking outside people, bringing them in and developing and being very meaningful. This guy in the sunglasses is Pete Osborne. He was the brother-in-law of our CPA. In 1993, he was an inventory, in 92 he was an inventory analyst for a local manufacturing company. They were moving to Florida. He would have to move to keep his job. He didn't want to move, so he was let go. And he signed on to finish out his bachelor's degree at a local college. But while he was doing that, we signed him up to take the place of inventory control in our company. He started there, then he started production planning. He had previously run a machine shop, incredibly gifted. In 1996, he moved down to that North Carolina factory that I showed you way back that was established in 1987. And we had consolidated all of our gravel business there at that time. And he whipped it was a mess, and he whipped it into shape in like 3 months. We were thinking we all had to move to support that factory, and in 3 months he had it humming. He has developed robotics, he has developed multiple coating technologies, both in terms of ceramic coatings, high integrity, high performance UV stable coatings. Even now, and you probably didn't notice it because the badge isn't large enough, but in our colored gravel that I have over there, if you look in the right-hand corner, it's got a green badge, and it says up to 30% of our gravel coatings are currently plant-based. He developed that. And now, in our company, I think we've got a few lines left, but the easiest in terms of not hard to figure out, but the hardest on the back is when you're taking boxes that range from 30 to 50 pounds or bags and putting them on a pallet. It's hard in the back, it's hard on the hands, major source, and it's hard to get people to do that these days. Well, he has bought pre-owned robot arms and the electronics to go with it and programmed them and fitted them with proper gripping technology and so forth. So virtually all of our palletizing lines are done with robotics. One that we have 2 lines in Illinois that we bought a $200,000 machine. The rest of them we did for like about $40,000 or $45,000 a line that Pete designed and assembled, programmed and put together. And that's why he is now the chief operating officer of the company, and he actually gets a salary higher than me. He's had a better year. Another example, this is Vicki Hicks. She started in 1990. She was 17 years old. A young mom. Down there, they start young. And I think she was, I don't know if she was a mom yet or not. I shouldn't say that, but she was 17. She started packing gravel. She worked herself into the office, became office manager, and for the last, I think 12 or 15 years, she is the plant manager of that factory in North Carolina. She is also the technical assistant to Pete in formulations and color matches. She's also in the area of government compliance. Whenever we have, Petco and PetSmart, they like to do audits of their suppliers. She is the one who makes sure that flows like so. OSHA things, anything like, she is just, and with all that, she also is probably our toughest purchasing negotiator. She drives a hard bargain and it is very hard to get a price increase for our suppliers through her. I'm a terrible negotiator. She's fantastic. And then Rick Donahue, we got him through the Colorado aggregate acquisition, and he, like I mentioned, he is the guy that we would be all looking at a scrapbook and not at the screen here, because he's the one who helped me I got the pictures together, but he's the one who put it all into PowerPoint and made it all work. So, and he's also a semi-professional photographer. He does all our photography. He does brochure design, works on label design, and he is training my daughter in her efforts to be in sales in the pet side of the business. And I'm sad that his plans are to retire at the end of next year. But he has agreed to continue on helping us with photography and design and marketing. This is the next generation, my 4 children. Benjamin is, his full name is Benjamin Hall Estes, named after the Benjamin Hall Estes of North Kent. I refer to him as the next me. He's the one, he's not as smart as I am yet, but he is more capable. So he has got his hands. This past week he was making samples and reformulating to get costs down so we could make a bid on $1 million worth of business in the pool business. And he does that. He does lots of stuff. He's done a great job.
Lee is my oldest son. He is in charge of our customer service efforts. Nathaniel here is my youngest son. He is the most recent into the company. He only started in 2021. He had previously been in the horse industry in equestrian and hunter jumpers, and in fact his wife still is in that. And they also run a side business like 10 minutes from the factory in North Carolina. They have a 40-acre horse farm that they run as a retirement farm for retired Grand Prix horses. You know, the concept is if you have the wherewithal to spend $500,000 on a horse, you have the wherewithal to, I don't know, $800 to $1,000 a month to pay to have the horse live a nice life at my son's farm in his retirement. And that's the next generation, the 6th generation. And like I said, I see them carrying on the professional level. And one of the other reason, not just because they're very capable, but they didn't have this, I can guarantee you, the early part, the first 10, 15 years of my career, they did not have a silver spoon. They had a plastic spoon. Many a week, a normal week, we had at least 2 dinners with pasta. And many times it was 3 or 4. And actually, because of that experience, my son Ben, who's kind of getting ready to drive, he is more financially conservative than I am. He sees me as a big cavalier when it comes to debt. But he's very capable, and they all know that he is the leader, but they're all involved, happily involved, and energetically involved. I refer to them as my retirement program. And I have more faith that, I'm sorry if I offend anybody, but I have more faith in them than Social Security. So, and last slide, this is the whole family. The fifth generation, me, there's my wife Jean, and Natalie and her husband Hunter, her then baby now, she's 3.5, Avery, and their son Rhett, who had his first day in kindergarten yesterday. And then there's Ben and his wife Ruth, and they have twin daughters who are 11, Emma and Olivia, and their younger daughter Eden, who is 8, and my son Lee, his wife Kara, and there is their son Aaron, who is now 7, and their son August, who is now 3.5. And there's also Natalie and Hunter have another son, River, who wasn't born yet when they took this picture. He's a year, it'll be 1.5 years, early September. And while I was away, I got a hilarious picture of him as his brother was going off to kindergarten. He's hilarious. So there's my family, and I believe that is my presentation. Thank you very much.
The gravel you get, does it come from any source, or has it got to be a certain type of gravel?
It has.
You do the grinding, or is it ground for you?
Generally, we bring in the gravel, especially in North Carolina. We bring in North Carolina, we bring in the gravel usually wet, but it's usually generally sized, but we run it through a washer and a screener to clean it, and then we dry it, and then we color it or coat it. But and it has to, our specification for our gravel, it needs to be 99% or more silica, because silica is inert. I don't know if you may have heard of Foxwoods in Connecticut casino. That's the first Indian casino. Well, we had a wonderful source. It was like white marble, gravel, right next to that casino, but it was quartz. And you saw the bright rainbow that a bag of gravel I made there. Well, that's made on a light beige. When we had white gravel, it was phenomenal. But what happened was, the Indian tribe had so much money from the casino place, and they bought the mine because the company could never have made the amount of money that the Indians offered them, so they wound up selling. And we had to scramble to find a gravel that was light enough, but it was never as white and bright as that mystic white. But to answer your question, it is specified, it's special gravel. We have a sole source in Colorado, and in that source, we actually have a grinding mill out in Colorado, so that if they don't have enough 1/4 inch or sand, we could grind it, we could take their 3/4 inch and grind it down and stay in business. So, there you go. Yes, sir.
You said earlier before the presentation that the last time you were in this area was in 1973.
Yes, sir.
What made you come out?
Oh, it was my parents' plan to go north. This was a start to see Port Kent, where the company was started, where our family started, and all that. And then from there, they went to over to Gorham, where the company the EB Estes had a mill in Gorham at the foot of Mount Washington. That's where my father was born. And we met an elderly, it was in 1973, my dad was, what's the math, 43 years old. We met an elderly couple who remembered my grandparents and remembered when my dad was born in the house next door. We found the house where he was born. And also, well, I won't go there. This is a goofy thing. I can be goofy sometimes. It was my first taste of McDonald's in Gorham, New Hampshire. What a treat. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Do you know where Elihu Beech Estes is buried?
Yes, he was buried down in a cemetery in Brooklyn. I think, here it is. Is it in this one? There's enough. If it's not in here, he was buried down in Brooklyn. I don't think it was in this cemetery, but I'm looking at it. It might, or at least not on this plot, but down in Brooklyn is where he's buried. Any other questions? Yes?
I am so impressed that you were able to run through all of your grandchildren, their names and their ages, without any notes.
Well, can I impress you more? No, I won't do it. I can give you the birth dates. Yes, I could also give the Commodore's birthday, July 15th. He was born on St. Swithin's Day.
Up here we think of our resources as timber and iron and water power, but sand, to build this kind of legacy out of sand, when did they stop using the Port Kent sand and go to these other sources of sand in the history of this early time?
I believe it was probably in the 1900s, because there was or maybe even sooner, but I know in the 1900s, there is a product called Black Beauty slag. It's used for sandblasting as its primary, and it's actually a byproduct of some process, and it's available in various places. It does not work well in aquariums because it has an iron content and will rust, but it made a terrific medium for black in signs. And I think it was in the probably 1930s, 1940s when they discovered that. And as with all it might have been a bit sooner, because when you're dealing with sand and gravel, one of the major issues is logistics. And like in North Carolina, we buy all of the gravel that we use for coloring is in North Carolina. It's not that far away. I told you about in Illinois, most of the sand is you know, 2 to 15 miles away. In Colorado, it's a little bit farther. Colorado's a big state, but it's like about 2.5 hours away. So getting close to the source is a major factor. So that's, I would imagine it was probably in the 1900s.
So you base your factory locations on the source of the
It's a
material?
major factor, yeah. Yes, yes. Actually, I'll tell you a funny story. So in the mid 80s, we were bringing sand from Illinois to New Jersey, and our like 75% of our output was being sold to a company that was in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And I was like, wait a minute, we're Illinois to New Jersey, back to Fort Wayne, what's wrong with this picture? So in June of 1987, I was 23 years old. And I'm not necessarily proud of it, it's just the way it was. I walked in one day and announced to everyone, I've got a plant trip, I'm going out to Illinois to look for a plant site out there. Now my poor cousin Steve, I mean, he's 8 years old. I've been at the company all of 2 years, 23 years old, going on 24. And he's been there 8 years. He's 8 years older than me. It's like, who does he think he is? And he's like ready to tear, and thank God for Dave. He said, Steve, take a deep breath, it'll all work out, it's gonna be okay. I went out there, made some contacts. Actually, I was able to, the realtor I was working with had me stay with him, and he lived in a house that Abraham Lincoln had stayed in during his life. It was really interesting. But as it turned out, we kind of regrouped, re-talked about it, and there was a pet show we were in Illinois in October. The very next day, me, Dave, and Steve went out to Ottawa to look for building sites. That day was the day of the 1987 crash. And we're driving around, and it was like, what are we doing? But we found a site, we found a manager, it all came together, and it's been terrific. So, there you go. Yes?
Number one, thank
Yes.
you for witnessing
Oh, yeah.
through your speech. And I also went to Amazon,
Yes.
and one brand of your product is named Clifford Estes. So you name your brands after your...
Well, that's the name of the company is still Clifford W. Estes Company.
Oh, okay.
So it
And
got
that's the new
changed.
pioneer generation.
Yes. Well, no, actually, so when the business fell apart under the Commodore, they didn't have EB Estes, they renamed the company for then the head proprietor, Clifford W. Estes. So, and they incorporated June 16th of 1960. Before that, it was like a partnership, and then they incorporated in New Jersey, and we're still incorporated as the Clifford W. Estes Company for my grandfather. But as it turned out, my dad was Clifford Estes Jr., and I was not happy that I didn't get to be the third. But my dad explained to me, you know, I never liked being another Clifford. It was a pain in the neck. I didn't want to put you through that, which made me feel like, okay, you know what, it's kind of normal. No matter what, your kid's not going to be totally happy with his name. You can't win. Yes. Any other questions? Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And